Okay, well, as mentioned, we're all really excited to have Emily here. She is our guest speaker and we look forward to having her come up here. So welcome.
Oh, we've got virtual people with us today too. Well, thank you for having me. Like I said, well, Joe mentioned we just got back from San Diego. I got back from chasing Joe around San Diego. He's trouble. No, he's actually really good. I'm kind of sad that he's leaving our board of directors. He's been excellent. A lot of fun to get to know as well. So when I was asked to do this, they wanted me to talk a little bit about professionalism, but also a couple of maybe issues that were being asked or talked about, and maybe that there's still confusion about. But I do want to start with professionalism. And I heard an agent say once, you know, the division of real estate sets the minimum standard, right? The law, the minimum standard that you guys have to comply, and the realtor code of ethics sets a higher standard. And the agent said, my standard is higher than that. I want people to know that I even have a personal standard beyond that I'm obligated to because of my license or because of my membership with the board. And I love that. So I hope you guys will think, what does professionalism mean to me? And how can I be a professional when people see me as a professional? But code of ethics aside, I want to talk about professional ethics being a set of principles that guide how professionals behave in a business environment. Okay, so a set of principles that guide how a professional behaves in a business. They're often codified as a set of rules that members of a profession must follow, which we do have that, right? We have the code of ethics, which gives the public something to rely on when dealing with realtors. They have some examples. Number one, responsibility. Professionals should always act in the best interest of their clients and take responsibility for their actions, right? Far too often we see agents putting their commission check or their own interests above that of their client and then failing to take responsibility when mistakes are made or problems occur. So responsibility, you should act in the best interest of your client always. Their best interests come first. Competence. Professionals should have the skills and knowledge to perform their duties effectively and continue to develop them throughout their careers. Why do you think that that is so important, especially in our industry?
Oh, you want me to read you what Brian Tracy said in my book this morning?
Sure.
He said, continuous learning is the minimum requirement for success in any field.
Right, and how much is changing in your field right now?
That's what my comment. So quickly,
Yeah,
we're not
it's
continually
perfect.
learning, then you're behind
Yeah, and then who else is falling behind?
our clients.
Your clients, right? There's a reason that one of the aspirational objectives of the Code of Ethics is to continue to remain informed. And they actually specify not just industry related, but on an educational level, on a government level, right? What's happening with laws and rules. And then obviously we have nationwide kind of practices that are changing that affect our industry too. So competence, having the skills and knowledge is what will set you apart as a professional. Fairness, okay? This is important because you guys work in an industry when it isn't just about you, right? There's a transaction where oftentimes two agents are involved and both looking for mutual success, right? Professionals should be fair and impartial in their decision-making process. You know, making sure, is this the best route? Am I treating the other party fairly? Am I showing respect to all parties involved? Things like that. Compliance with laws and regulations associated with local, state, and federal entities. You know, this one, I was glad to see this as one of those key definitions because there unfortunately has been a lot of pushback on some of these rule changes, right? Like we're taking something away from you or we're making it more difficult for you to do your jobs or things like that. But part of professionalism is compliance. You have the laws that you're obligated to under the code, or sorry, under your license. You have your obligations under the code of ethics. You have MLS rules. I just the other day had an issue with an agent who's like, well, my buyer wants this on the MLS, right? Well, does your buyer get to choose and dictate how we run the MLS? Or does your seller? It's not about what your clients want. They've boarded this train with you, right, the MLS, and you're a subscriber and you have to comply. It's up to you to educate them on what you can and can't do when it comes to the tools that they've literally hired you to use, right? And so compliance, make sure that you're adhering to the rules and ethical obligations that you have. And then confidentiality, protecting the confidentiality of personal information. Anything else you guys want to add to that? What you think sets a person aside as a professional or sets them apart from somebody else as a professional? Anything?
I'll say something.
Go ahead.
I like what you said right up front. I like that. When you're separating the commission check from, from the responsibility of the transaction and stuff, because it's really easy to kind of think in terms of, hey, what do I get? And then I personally, as I've traveled through life these 50 years, and I've become oh so wise. Yeah, right. But anyway, I really found that people are way more concerned with what they don't get versus what they do get.
Right.
And, if you ever want to do an experiment on that, just try it, take two people, give them something they wouldn't normally get, and then give one just a little bit more than the other, and then make sure the other one finds out about it. And you haven't done anything good, you created a problem,
Right.
because people are only concerned about what they don't get. And so I think that as we mature in our business and our life, if we can focus on what we do get and in our agreements, and actually, once we make that deal, no matter what's being offered, so for example, if you're representing a buyer and you agree to 2.25% or something like that, the seller ends up offering 3 as what they're offered. Well, you've already agreed to 2.25, so be good with that. Be good with what you do get, not what you don't get. We can start to kind of have that mentality, then it changes the way that we look at things, and then our gratitude level changes based on what we do get versus what we don't. And I think as we do that in this industry, particularly with the changes, I think it'll serve us well.
No, I appreciate that. I think that initially when commissions came off the MLS, or, we were preparing for commissions to come off the MLS, there were a lot of agents that would say to me, well, what's the value in the MLS now? Why even have the MLS system if I can't see a commission? Well, there's so much more to that system than just that commission offering, right? So much more. And I think agents who tend to stay focused on what might be being offered out there instead of what they're actually agreeing to do, I think it's going to come back to bite them at the end, in a multitude of ways, instead of, because just like Joe said, just because it's being offered doesn't mean you're entitled, right? You're entitled to that. You're entitled to what was agreed to with your consumer. And then there's this whole talk of, well, now I'm going to have these conversations with my buyers and sellers now, these compensation conversations that I've never had to have before. And it's so uncomfortable. And what other industry hides fees from you? Or doesn't disclose fees, or doesn't talk about fees? You go into a doctor's office for a procedure and they're going to put down and say, these are the cost of my services to perform this procedure, right? You call a landscaper and say, I want you to do the weekly maintenance on my yard. They're going to say, these are the costs for my services and here's the value you get for it, right? So yes, this element of having the compensation on the MLS that was easy, you could see it, was there, but as a result of this settlement, it was because the consumers, the people actually paying those fees, didn't have full awareness of what they were paying, how they were being paid, right? So I hope too that through this process, you can kind of switch your mindset to Yes, I can't see the commission up front. It's not forthcoming to me. But my consumer, my client is gonna be far more educated and informed as they move forward, making decisions that ultimately are funded by them, right? There is some real benefits, and I want to share an example of what I think was an agent acting professionally and an agent acting unprofessionally. And both of these just happened yesterday. So I had two agents come to my office yesterday to talk, which I love. You guys share your experiences with me, the good, the bad. It helps me help you, and I think we can all learn from it. But you know, one agent came and he said, you know, I did this buyer consultation thing now, where I sat down prior to going out and showing homes. We had a conversation about what the process would look like, what they could expect, the services that I was going to provide. And we had conversations on options for how I get paid. He said, I gave him 3 options. I said, you can just pay me, which I commend an agent who's willing to have that conversation. When I was an agent, I did have a buyer offer to pay me in a FSBO situation once. And I thought, I think agents are too fearful of having that conversation, but there are some people out there that are willing to pay you for your services. So it's worth having that discussion. He said, I told them that they could pay me. I told them that there may be homes out there where the listing agent has pre-negotiated compensation sharing that they're willing to share with me. And he said, and I told them that we could negotiate in the REPC. And they asked questions and he answered them. They went and saw homes. They picked one that they obviously wanted to make an offer on. They sat down to write the offer, and the buyer said, let's just do this all in the REPC. For just like what Joe said, it's clean, it's clear. They were a part of that conversation. They had agreed to 3%. They made an offer, they wrote it into the REPC, and the offer was accepted. He said, I never once called another listing agent to inquire about compensation. He said, I didn't need to. My client was fully prepared to navigate home buying, to write their offer. They knew all of their options. They knew what I was willing to do and they agreed to it. And I still don't even know if the listing agent was offering compensation sharing. So it didn't matter, right? So I'm like, yes, clients informed, clients aware, clients are making decisions, right? And the agent is guiding them and providing them valuable information. The next agent that showed up at my office was an agent that represented a builder. They had a buyer come, and he said this was already really difficult because the buyer didn't speak English, but they brought a translator, okay? And we showed them, we had a spec, they wanted to make an offer on the spec. I asked all the right questions. Have you been working with another agent? No. And so we sat down to write the offer, and he said, with my builder, there's no limited agency. You either have an agent or you're unrepresented, right? So as they're filling out this offer, a comment is made about the last offer falling through. And the agent thought, well, wait a second. You said you weren't working with another agent. And they said, well, we're not, but we did make another offer on a property last week. And so doing the right thing, he starts asking more questions. Well, did you enter into an agency agreement? And they said, well, we signed something, but it was just for that property. And he was like, are you sure? So this agent representing the builder did all the right things, but is still in kind of a dilemma. But I want to put that over here for a minute and go to what we found out. So what we found out is this buyer did go see another property. An agent showed up to show it to him, put down a buyer broker, and said, the law says I can't show you this home unless you sign this agreement. And the interpreter asked about it, and they said, don't worry, it's just for this property and it's just for today, okay? And the interpreter said, I was there. They said it was just for that property and just for that day. Well, the builder is like, well, I want to be careful because if you have signed a buyer broker, you could be financially obligated to pay this agent, right? Like, I don't want to get you under contract and then you have this financial problem that causes you not to be able to buy the home or whatever, right? Again, an agent looking out for who? Well, and not only, it's not even his client, right? But this consumer, this person that wants to buy this house. They get a copy of the agreement. It's for all of Washington County and the term is till the end of this year. Okay, and so you have a buyer who was deceived into signing an agreement, which, by the way, it's not the law that requires you to get a written agreement prior to showing, right? It's because of your membership in the Realtor organization and what just transpired. The law does not require that of you. At the very least, the law requires you enter into an agreement prior to representing them in a transaction, right? So dishonest, right? And a level of manipulation there, assuring them that, you know, this agency agreement doesn't go beyond me showing this house when in reality it does. And now the builder's looking at this like, well, because the builder's question to me was, can I go under contract with this buyer and not be obligated to pay the agent? And I said, well, you didn't offer commission. It's not on the MLS and commissions are gone anyways. Did you make a public offering of commission? They said no. He said this particular home is a spec home. It wasn't advertised with a commission. And I said, it's not you that's obligated. It's the buyer, right? The buyer is obligated to compensate that agent. And so he said, well, what are the options? And I said, well, first of all, you shouldn't be advising somebody else's client. You really have to defer them back to their agent. It's unfortunate, but you could accept this offer and move forward. But if that agent tries to collect, okay, that buyer could back out, right? Because now they have this $15,000 commission that they have to pay. And he said, you know what, maybe I'll get in touch with the other agent and see what we can do. Maybe he'll accept a referral fee, but I can't pay a full commission based on the price that the buyer and I negotiate. Do you see the dilemma here? Like all around, and where did it start? It didn't start because of the builder's behavior and lack of education and asking the right questions. It started because a buyer started looking at homes with an agent that did not thoroughly explain the form that they signed, okay, and prepare them for what to expect and follow up, right? Article 16 of the Realtor Code of Ethics obligates you to thoroughly explain any form that your clients sign, any form that applies to the seller's disclosures, agency forms, unrepresented buyer, all of them, okay? So think about the last transaction you did, and I'm not asking you to raise your hands or anything, but think about the last transaction you did. Did you send all the forms to them in DocuSign and say, call me if you have questions? Or did you say, let's go through these documents and then I'm gonna send them to you through DocuSign? Okay. I can't tell you how many calls I get from buyers and sellers who the first thing they say to me is, I should have read what I was signing. And a lot of times they will take personal responsibility for that, right? But they'll say, I had no idea I signed an agency form because it came over at the same time as the Rep C. Right? I didn't, and that didn't work out and I wanted a different agent. Now I'm finding out I'm bound to this agent, right? They're not understanding, and you guys actually have an ethical obligation. If they turned you in and you didn't take the time to have a conversation about these forms, you could be in violation of Article 16. Okay. So those are the two examples, most recent examples I've had. And I've had some more where agents were like, oh my gosh, this transaction was so difficult. I worked so well. I hope to work again with the other agent because it went so well. That's the kind of agent you want to be, right? That after a transaction, you walk away going, I hope I get to work with them again. This was an amazing experience, right? For both me and for my clients. That is what sets professionals apart, right? Their ability to educate, their ability to set their own personal feelings aside and ensure that their clients' needs are met, their ability to keep things confidential, their ability to respect even when there are disagreements. I had an agent say to me once, but Emily, I will fight for my clients. And I said, but does that literally mean you have to fight? Like, you can still be a strong advocate, a strong negotiator without being rude, without being disrespectful, right? Any comments or questions about that? I think now more than ever, agents need to put professional practices and professional behavior into place. I think that because this has been so widely publicized, I think your buyers and sellers are watching. You know, they're watching to make sure they actually get value for what they're paying. I think I actually got a letter from an attorney on an MLS listing where an agent had misrepresented the property. An attorney was watching our MLS and didn't do anything about it except to bring to our attention, hey, you have an agent that is misrepresenting a property on the MLS. So make sure your advertisements are truthful. Okay, any information you put out there is accurate. I just think people are watching, and we have a responsibility to protect the public, right? And very easily, agents can get caught up in predatory type practices, like, it's the law, you have to sign this, I'm holding the house hostage, you can't see it until you sign it, right? Stuff like that.
So I had an experience similar to that, and I think we're gonna be hostage. So I had a phone call, it was a signed call, and she wanted to see the property, and I says, I need to meet with you in my office first. Let's go over what your options are, your obligations, what my obligations to you, and you wanted to see this property. We went through the gamut of questions of if they were working with anybody. And last minute, she's like, I don't have time to meet with you at the office. Can we just meet at the house? Because we had that conversation and I explained over the phone that she would need to sign something before we went inside. I'm like, sure, on this scenario, I'll just meet you at the home. We've already had the basis of the consultation. Anyways, we get there. She's like, I didn't really understand why I needed to sign something, but I'm just ready to look at the house. And I said, well, let me explain that again. I can't take you to see the property. We can't go inside. We're here at the property. You can't even go in the backyard. So I can't send you a virtual tour. So I kind of explained the whys. And then 2 days later, I scheduled an open house. And I said, hey, I know you weren't wanting to sign an agreement to see the property. We're holding an open house. So here's the dates and times, and you can come take a look then without having to sign an agreement. She showed up at the open house. She ended up making an offer. And because I had explained everything so thoroughly, she decided to go ahead and hire me to represent her. And that's not a house that she is going to buy. That didn't fit her needs. But had I not gone through that process and just showed her the property she wanted to see, had her sign a limited showing agreement, she wouldn't have been informed. And she would have just called the next agent, signed whatever they wanted her to sign, saying, hey, you can't see it without signing this agreement. So I feel like with us being more professional and holding ourselves to a higher standard, explaining to the public what the roles and responsibilities that we have for them and why, then they're more willing to work with us. And then we don't get the calls that are like, I'm unhappy you did something, because everything is explained up front. So they are very well informed with what their obligations are.
I love that. And, you know, I think one thing that people miss in this settlement is the settlement was meant to provide choice, okay? And essentially what I consider informed consent, right? Like, you've given me all the information and now I can make an informed decision on how I want to move forward. Okay, so I love this in managing expectations. The worst thing you could do is schedule a showing, show up to the house and say, now I can't let you in without showing anything or signing anything. And that's, I don't care which you're gonna use, what agreement. I mean, if you're the agent who says, I work exclusively under a buyer broker and won't, you better not be showing up at the door and telling them that then, right? That is not the time to say, my time is valuable and I only work under an exclusive agency agreement, okay? And then not let them in. having the conversation before, is important. I think it's equally important to prepare people with this new written agreement rule, even if you are using the limited showing agreement, is to say, hey, I'm happy to show you homes this weekend. Are you aware of, it depends on how much detail you want to go into. I've had some agents say, because of a lot of industry changes, we're required to get a written agreement before touring homes now that help you understand, you know, the agent and client relationship. Okay, fine. Whatever it is, prepping them before that, but showing up and making them feel like they're about to enter a home and then say, now you can't enter the door is, in my opinion, the wrong approach. And it doesn't make you look good, and it doesn't make realtors in general look good. And I said, well, what if I had an agent say, what if I encounter somebody who said, well, I saw homes with so-and-so last weekend and they didn't get an agreement. I said, use that to your advantage. Tell them, I'm sorry, there are rules, there are ethical obligations, and I have to explain this to you and at least get something in writing that we had this conversation, whether it's no services, and show them that you're the actual professional, right? I think that means something. I think most people will operate under appreciation for having more knowledge than they did at the beginning, right? Especially when it comes to these big financial decisions. Any other comments or questions about? Yes.
I don't want to, obviously I have my time up front, so I don't want to overtalk, but I think it's important to understand that when you're working with another agent, you know, it's not you against them. It's not at all. I mean, the idea is buyer wants to buy, seller wants to sell, and you're helping facilitate that in the best way possible, in the least amount of time, in the least amount of aggravation. And both of you are, not just one person. You know, I know the listing agents say that, but as buyer's agent, that's your job as well. If you're not there to create problems, you're not there to create.
I have seen so many agents be the barrier. They become the problem, right?
Yeah.
Where otherwise, you know, the buyer and seller probably wouldn't have had a problem. The agent inserts themselves in a way to, I don't know, look,
It's almost as if that's how they justify their fee, but really they're messing things up.
but really they're messing things up,
Yeah,
right?
So I mean, as you know, as an agent, I think with other people, you're gonna see them again. And your idea is to knock down barriers and make it collaborative and make it the best experience you can for both parties.
Mhm.
You want it to be happy at the end. Someone doesn't have to be bleeding and bludgeoned for you to have done your job. You know, if you're representing the buyer and they're happy with the home and they get it on time and in good condition, you've done your job.
Right.
That doesn't mean you have to kick the seller in the shins on the way out of the house and vice versa.
I like it. Before, any other questions or comments before we talk about, I've gotten a lot of questions lately about open houses. So I did want to, address that a little bit because we know that if you're the listing agent or you're an agent from the listing brokerage, okay, that's important. You do not need to get an agreement from every buyer that walks through that open house, right? Is that pretty clear, understood? If you have a listing and Rebecca's hosting an open house, she does not need it. She represents the listing brokerage, okay? The questions I'm getting are more of, I'm seeing a trend of agents outside of the listing brokerage wanting to host open houses, and I get it. They want to generate leads, right? Okay, so the question becomes, what does the law require? And then how can we apply the settlement principles to that? Okay, well, I spent about 90 minutes with Lee Viette. She's the new director for the Division of Real Estate, and Katie Wright, she's the chief investigator for the division at this UAR conference. They were there, they presented as part of the legal panel. I spent some time with them and was talking about this very thing. And okay, disclaimer, I may not like it, but it's important that you guys know how they view it so that you know how not to get in trouble, okay? I view personally this type of scenario as that hosting agent has no intent to sell that property. They're there to get leads. They're not there. So really this is advertising, you know? The division sees it differently. they confirmed to me just last Friday that if you would like another agent from another office sitting at your listing, sub-agency or a co-brokerage agreement is required. In fact, they were heard along with multiple attorneys saying, just don't do it, guys. And I'll give you a reason why, okay? So let's say, and this happens a lot because you have agents up north that take listings down here, but then they want they don't want to put it on our MLS or join our MLS. They want it on our MLS, they just don't want to pay for it, right? So they contract with an agent down here and enter into a co-brokerage agreement, but they're like, you don't represent the seller, I represent the seller. And they, so that the agent down here puts it on the MLS, holds an open house, but any communication is supposed to go through that other agent. Before that open house, that agent kind of scours the neighborhood, goes and knocks on doors. Hey, we're doing an open house of your neighbors. And one of those neighbors says, I saw that their house was for sale. I think it's overpriced. What do you think? What can you do? What do you say?
Yeah.
You can't, you're literally not representing that seller, but in the eyes of the division, you are, right? Because you entered into a co-brokerage agreement and all the same fiduciary duties required as if you took that listing have now been deferred to you. You make a comment about, yeah, I think that seller way overpriced this home. You've now breached your duty to that seller that's not even really your seller. So there's like a host of reasons why, from a legal perspective, it's not just it's not a good idea, right? There's ways that violations can occur. And like I said, the division sees the act of an open house by an agent outside your office as needing sub-agency. And truthfully, the sub-agency agreement that the UAR provides does not apply to this situation. It would require a separate agreement, an addendum to the listing agreement, okay, that essentially authorizes if it's, let's say it's Coldwell Banker in Salt Lake and they want to defer somebody here and it's KW, they have to defer and create sub-agency. And there is a section in the code that literally identifies what all the requirements for that sub-agency are. So you can defer to that to make your addendum, okay? Be careful to draft your own form because I also found out that agents drafting their own forms is violating state law. Because I said, well, what if an agent drafts a form and they said, no, agents can't draft their own forms. It has to be by a legal professional. Okay, so, I mean.
Which that's funny to me, because when we write up addendums, we do just exactly that.
I know.
And Mendenhall kind of gave us that direction to do that, our legal counsel, right?
She was there. She's not our legal counsel, but she's somebody we consult with. But she actually said you may need to write up a form. But the division confirmed on Friday that if you guys draft your own forms without legal counsel,
You
it would
would
be
be
considered
outside of an addendum.
outside of an addendum. If you use the addendum, okay, the written addendum, and you put, that we're creating a sub-agency agreement with this agent at this brokerage, right? And you have all of that, you can use the standard addendum. It's when an agent creates their own form with their own legal language, essentially, that the division takes issue with it. So
So this is only a problem if it's
with another brokerage.
Y'all keep it in our KW.
Yeah, if you can, keep it in your KW family, okay? Anybody who's affiliated with the principal broker, okay? I recognize that there are scenarios when that doesn't happen, but there are a lot of agents and brokers, new agents that are hungry for leads. They'll often call another agent from another office and say, hey, you have this great new listing. Would you mind if I host an open house? And I get it, their intent, again, isn't to sell that house, it's to hopefully, obtain some buyer leads. But the way the division is looking at it is, if you are going to do that, the seller has to authorize it, and agency has to be deferred. So.
It doesn't apply if it's a KW agent.
If it's within, because you have to remember, your listing is with the brokerage, and it's very clear in your listing agreement that it says, or any other authorized with the brokerage or something like that. I don't know the exact verbiage, but it authorizes the brokerage. You were their designated agent, so yeah, I mean, you guys just have to decide, truthfully, am I going to allow that, you know, with my listings, yes or no? If you are, use caution and make sure you have policies, of how you handle that, and I would follow that up with run your agreement by your broker, okay? And certainly don't create your own agreements, use the standard addendum to add that agency on, okay?
I'm just telling you, I don't review it.
Please just don't, I mean, truthfully, within your own office is simple, and also within your own office, they don't have to vet or get a written agreement from any other agent that's coming through, right? So it just, there's some layers of complexity there that make it a little challenging. Any other questions that you guys have about the practice changes that you've seen and you're like, I don't know, can I do this? The statement that Joe read at the beginning, I can tell you the problems that we've had on our MLS have actually been few, which I'm really happy about, but you should know that every new listing going on the MLS is being reviewed, and every closed listing is being reviewed to make sure no verbiage was added. And so far, I've only had 2 misuses of FlexMail, somebody talking about commissions in FlexMail, bananas or percentages, whatever, both. No, don't do. And most of the issues that we've had on listings is agents are forgetting to take out that language. Do you guys remember, some of you were adding it to your listings, like this commission is being offered where the service is filed, something like that. Most of them are forgetting to remove. But so far, we have, our board has done really well, I think, in terms of navigating the MLS and listings and such. And I hope that you guys are doing well with the practice changes. So, yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much, Emily.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, the fun part, like you said, I mean, we got 76 new listings last month alone in our office. So if you're wanting to do open houses, there's plenty of options, right? So reach out to your family members here at the office and get things done. So, hey, we have pizza out there. Thank you again so much, Emily. That was wonderful.